Okay, well, let's turn to the numbers now and bring in polls analyst Philippe Fournier to the conversation, the founder and the writer of 338 Canada. Philippe, thank you for joining us again.
Good evening, Michael.
So, you know, Donald Trump, and I want to begin there because he was already having this impact on the federal election campaign, essentially shifting the ballot box question for many Canadians. But now comes this tariff threat, 25% on vehicles made outside the United States. How do you think that's going to affect the campaigns?
Well, this is a very good question. I think it's also a very legitimate one, but we do not know the answer to this prior for the simple reason that it depends on how the leaders and the parties react to it. In January, Michael, when Mr. Trump started his daily attacks on Canada's economy and sovereignty, we saw the numbers in the polls move, but only after we saw the initial reaction of Justin Trudeau and Pierre Poilievre, for instance. Justin Trudeau basically said, we're not going to stand for that. And the first reaction of Mr. Poilievre was, well, this is Justin Trudeau's fault. And so I think voters reacted to that. Now we'll see in the coming days how the reaction of the Canadian electorate is regarding the numbers, but it's going to have an effect for sure, but which way, I'm not sure.
Okay, well, watching for that, although, you know, as we say that, we should also talk about your latest analysis here, because the numbers are a bit gobsmacking. Let's take a look at the top line here, because you currently have the Liberals ahead of the Conservatives at 41%, the Conservatives at 37%, the NDP at 9%, the Bloc at 6%, the Greens at 3%. But, you know,
that's right.
Talk to us about the shifting numbers, because, you know, we're still talking about within margins of error, I think. So what's the durability of these numbers?
Well, I would say that there's a huge difference between having a 4-point gap between the two parties in one single poll or one 4-point gap in the aggregate of polls. So this is the average, the weighted average of polling that sees the Liberals climbing. The Conservatives still in the high 30s, but suddenly the high 30s is not enough when you have an NDP now in single digits, and the Liberals have been the beneficiary of this NDP collapse. And so, yes, the numbers are still close in the vote count, but in the seat count, it is not close anymore. This is no longer a toss-up. Obviously, Michael, very careful. I'm not making a prediction here. I'm telling you the projection of the day, the numbers we see right now. The Liberals are deep in majority territory with the numbers we have today.
Yeah, 187 as we take a look at that board right now. 187 is what you have the Liberals at. The Conservatives at 126, the Bloc down to 23, the NDP down to 6, and the Greens down to 1 seat. And I think, you know, before we went on air, you were saying that that's the Kitchener Centre seat. So you know, when you look at this kind of seat projection, it is still very early on in the campaign, though, Philippe. Can we take this to the bank, or is this going to? Yeah, exactly. So talk to us about that.
I'm very glad you asked the question, Michael, because I get it from many readers and observers and journalists. Can we take this to the bank? The answer is no. The numbers have moved so much in the past 2 months that it would really be a fool's bet to say they won't change again. Now, however, the Conservatives, we have to say, they went from supermajority territory in around 230 seats 2 months ago and are now facing very good odds of losing if an election was held tonight. And the Liberals went from, they were done, they were cooked, they were behind the Bloc Québécois in the seat projections, not in Quebec, but from coast to coast. And now we see them in good position. This is not a fluke as much as is a result of tons of data from the polls, but also regional data that shows that the Liberals have recovered and are leading in Atlantic Canada. The Liberals have taken the lead in Quebec, overtaking the Bloc. Right now, we see the Liberals having an advantage in Ontario, and also British Columbia, with the collapse of the NDP, has really been good to the Liberals lately. You combine all this, this is a majority for the Liberals if they can hold it.
Okay, you talked about Quebec, and again, the projection currently has the Bloc down to 23 seats. But, you know, I wonder how closely you'll be watching Quebec, because, you know, Mr. Carney may be enjoying positive reviews right now, but in this first week of the campaign, there have been some major questions about his time at Brookfield. More importantly, for Quebec voters, he flubbed Nathalie Provost's name, his own Liberal candidate and a survivor of the massacre at l'École Polytechnique, which Carney mistakenly called Concordia. What are you watching there?
Well, okay, so these flubs, if they become a pattern, will be a problem for Mr. Carney. That's no doubt about it. However, right now the ballot box question is still who can stand up to the American administration. And in the numbers we see, not only is the ballot box question in Quebec similar to that in Canada, but we see even higher numbers for how to deal with the Americans in Quebec. Obviously, steel, aluminum, and all these resources that we sell to the Americans. So if these flubs are repeated, it could be a problem. But with how fast the media cycles go nowadays, this could be forgotten by next week.
Okay, well, here we are, week one of the campaign, and of course, Donald Trump figuring large once again. Philippe, thank you for this. We'll speak again next week. Thank you for the time this evening.
Always a pleasure, Michael.